Hello everyone, this is Eric Sweden with NASCIO, and we are presenting the new CIO operating system using this introductory webinar, and this will be a foundation for work going forward relative to the CIO as broker. And we are going to be talking to you about the initiative, our planned deliverables. NASCIO has been exploring this topic and various delivery mechanisms for many years. Our annual surveys have dealt with consolidation and multi-sourcing. In 2018, the NASCIO Executive Committee approved a collaboration project with Integris Applied. We've partnered with Integris for a variety of reasons, including their experience working with the states of Texas and Georgia, two states we believe are on the leading edge of multi-sourcing in state government. This is our project team. Dr. Craig Orgeron and Eric Boyette are the co-chairs of our NASCIO Enterprise Architecture and Governance Committee, which is sponsoring this initiative. Dr. William Riles has been providing expert guidance throughout the project. Les Druitt provided guidance and leadership to the Texas initiative, which we believe was the first real effort toward formalized multi-sourcing in state government. Patrick Moore was State CIO for the state of Georgia and started the initiative there. In the early stages of their multi-sourcing project, he was working with Les Druitt on their initiative. We believe this is the future for state government, and we therefore started this project with the objective of creating guidance documents, including a playbook, to help states toward effective implementation of a multi-sourcing discipline, taking advantage of the learnings from states like Texas and Georgia. At this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Craig Orgeron and Eric Boyette for their perspectives on the importance of this project. Dr. Craig Orgeron, over to you.
Hi, I'm Craig Orgeron, CIO for the state of Mississippi. The technology world continues to grow increasingly complex. In addition, state governments, guided by state CIOs, are often asked to radically innovate on the latest next-generation technology while keeping legacy systems up and running. How are CIOs grappling with an expansive portfolio of source solutions? That very question led our NASCIO Enterprise Architecture and Governance Committee to examine multi-sourcing, with a focus on the CIO serving as the broker of shared services. Our committee, collaborating with Integris Applied, is focused on the evolution of a services-based model that can be measured, monitored, and tracked, giving CIOs a path to operational maturity. Special thanks to my co-chair, Eric Boyette, Eric Sweden of NASCIO, Integris, and from my organization, Dr. William Riles.
Hi, I'm Eric Boyette, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Information Technology and State Chief Information Officer. Thank you for taking the time to join our webinar to explore the model of CIO as a broker. This model recognizes that as technology evolves and continues to expand into every aspect of government, CIOs can no longer deliver every solution through their agencies. Modern CIOs must understand technology, but they must be willing to work with partners inside and outside of state government. Today's CIO must first be able to identify problems and how technology can address gaps in services. The best solutions can exist outside of the CIO's office. Partnerships with the vendor community enable us to identify the most efficient solutions for our citizens. This is new ground for many of us who are more accustomed to acting as technologists rather than negotiators and/or brokers. I would like to thank my fellow members of NASCIO who have worked so hard on this project, particularly Dr. Craig Orgeron, the Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of IT Services. And thank you again to each of you for your interest in our work.
This is our agenda for today. Our objective is to gain insights into state government delivery platforms, best practices, and advice for other states. Our discussion will be used as an important reference point for our project, CIO, the new CIO operating system, our playbook, our online community blogs, and future short reports on this topic. On this webinar, we'll cover the following topics: project overview and intended outcomes, the project framework, the four forces of government change, and we'll review the services maturity model created by Integris Applied. The purpose of this project is to delve deeper into the trends that are defining the CIO role and to help CIOs, governors, budget directors, procurement officers, legislators, and other policymakers to integrate the state technology function into government operations in a more strategic manner. Under the owner-operator model, the state CIO was once seen as primarily the purveyor of hardened data centers, networks, and incident response. Today's technology organization is not viewed as a business partner playing a strategic role in the state's agenda. Collaboration, communication skills, and business acumen are now the state CIO attributes sought by governors, high-level policymakers, and legislators. Engaging with customers and understanding the needs of business units delivering products and services to citizens defines a CIO's ability to deliver outcomes. Here's our hypothesis. Customer, political, market, and inertial forces are moving state government CIOs toward a brokerage of services delivery model. A brokerage allows the CIO the ability to respond to customer needs, keep pace with market demands, leverage new technology models, and engage across multiple stakeholder groups. The evolving demands on the role require a framework to help a CIO lead and manage change within a political environment and to help stakeholders understand the CIO leadership role. Some of the background information that led us down this path came from our annual surveys, and here we're presenting the results of our 2017 State CIO survey. And joining me in this discussion are Patrick Moore and Les Druitt. So as we look at this table of results going back to 2015 through 2017, we see quite a change in states moving more and more towards the idea of multi-sourcing. Les and Patrick, would you like to comment on your observations relative to this set of survey results?
No, absolutely, Eric. And thanks so much for having us on today's webinar, and thank you so much for including Integris Applied as a partner in this project. We're excited to be a part of it, and certainly excited to help NASCIO in how they're talking and engaging with their stakeholders and with policy leaders around the country. If we would, I'd like to take us back for a moment to the hypothesis. And I think that the premise of the project runs deep and is a amalgamation of a number of concepts that go beyond delivery, that extend into how the CIO is engaging with stakeholders and how the CIO is able to lead within a government enterprise. That's a complex organization with a number of forces that are hard to manage and hard to influence. So as we're thinking about this, we wanted to look at trends both that NASCIO has seen over the years in terms of what delivery models are changing and how citizens and customers are expecting to receive their services, as well as an understanding of what the CIO role is. And how policy leaders can take a better understanding of that role to apply technology in a more effective way across an enterprise and ultimately to the end user, who is the citizen and the taxpayer. And in looking at that, as you were noting, Eric, there's a lot of data to support these trends. Over time, we've seen as states have moved to consolidate, as they've moved to adopt new technologies, more and more, they're seeing that the way that they deliver service is through a number of different platforms, oftentimes a number of different suppliers, including the organization itself, the retained services that the state itself chooses to keep and to deliver because they believe that those services are core to how they're serving both agencies as well as citizens. But all of this means that the way in which a CIO manages and the way in which an organization is built is changing. And what we know is that the way that there are improved tool sets, there are improved frameworks, and there's new ways of thinking about how to run an organization and how to manage a multi-supplier environment to take advantage of new technologies and to help meet citizen demand. If we move to the next slide, Eric, which I think is just continuing this trend, the data goes back to 2015. Where we see that 85% of state CIOs see themselves as a broker of some services, where you must integrate multiple offerings, multiple platforms, multiple suppliers, and the CIO's own internal organization. At the time, 2015, we see that 16% of respondents either already operate primarily as a broker or see themselves migrating to primarily a broker of services. So these aren't just our words, Eric, for this project. I think that these are words being used by CIOs. We see it both in the state government space as well as in the commercial space, but increasingly because of citizen demands and their expectations of government and technology, the need to be able to build a platform that integrates and aggregates multiple sources of service is an important concept for a CIO to gain the delivery credibility they need to be a leader in an enterprise. I'll pause for a minute. I don't know, Les, if you wanted to jump in and add anything here as we kind of talk about the trends that we've seen in working with states and in our experience with states.
Patrick, I think the issue for many CIOs as they try and address the increasing complexity in the shared services arena is how they retain accountability, how they're able to show their stakeholders that they can effectively adapt without losing control. And I think that's the fundamental question we're all trying to answer.
Yeah, thanks, Les. I agree, and I think that's why this project will shed some insight in the direction that CIOs are headed, but then more importantly, help their stakeholders understand why that role is critical to the operation of state government. As we think through the framework for the project and the different layers that we are assessing and analyzing, as Eric alluded to earlier, we're trying to frame a way of thinking about the role of the state CIO and how that individual and that individual's team needs to operate inside a large enterprise as complex as government is and can be. And in doing that framing, we wanted to capture the forces that affect, influence, and oftentimes dictate the things that a CIO can and should do. The flip side is that the more effective a CIO is at influencing these forces and maneuvering across and within them, the more effective they become as a leader. And the forces we're talking about are the political forces across all branches of government, the market forces that are introducing new technologies and new ways of doing things that are affecting expectations that customers have, and the markets that are developing all the time new platforms for delivering services. You have the customer forces and how they expect to receive services, whether it's through Amazon or whether it's from your DMV. And then you have the inertial forces, those forces that have a tendency to stay at rest or in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. And it's everything from the bureaucracy of an organization, procurement rules, delivery processes, the things that are very difficult to move, but that can move if they are affected in the right way and for the right purpose. And in thinking about all of this, what is the outcome that a CIO these days is trying to achieve? Well, ultimately, we would argue is that they're trying to improve the delivery of service to citizens. And oftentimes that means changing government, changing the way technology is delivered, and helping agencies receive that technology in a different way that will make them more effective at implementing their mission. And so when we think about the principles that help drive the thinking of any type of change, what could they be? And so we've offered some that include decisions are made with the citizen in mind, that building an organization and environment that can adapt, as Les alluded to. How do you take in new technologies and do things in a way that will help improve the delivery of service? Inside a government environment, there's always a need to balance what the enterprise requires with what the agencies need. It's a constant back and forth. There's never a perfect balance,
but being able to recognize the tension between those two forces and then help deliver against both becomes part of the art of making change work inside an enterprise. And then ultimately, an effective use of taxpayer dollars. These days, the demands for government to be transparent are clear, and as a CIO, one of the charges of making any type of change is that taxpayer dollars and budgets are managed well. And with the leadership role of the CIO comes a need for the CIO to have delivery credibility. The ability to deliver services becomes the currency that they're able to use in working with their stakeholders and in gaining influence across an enterprise. A CIO that cannot deliver services, that cannot adapt, is going to be less effective at leading than one who can do those things. And in thinking about that, we've put together a maturity model. It's something that we've built over time that we believe reflects a path that an organization can take as it becomes more mature as a services-based organization and as a delivery organization capable of brokering services across multiple platforms. This is the maturity model that we intend to use as a way of filtering the results from the survey that many of you have participated in and that all of you have received. But it's a way of thinking and ordering the thoughts around the path that an organization can take to become more effective as a broker of services in a new environment where technology is maturing quickly and new platforms and capabilities are available every single day.
You know, Patrick, as you look at a maturity model like this, and in a lot of the feedback we've gained from clients as we've addressed some of their challenges and had a conversation around how to frame their challenge to their stakeholders. This isn't just a simple linear progression. This is often a case that there are parts of a CIO's portfolio that are at different levels of maturity. They're trying to address different challenges, and so that for parts of their portfolio, they're at different stages. And so this isn't you need to be moving from stage 3 to stage 4. It may be that parts of your environment belong at a stage 1 or stage 2. You know, Patrick, as we've had conversations with clients using this maturity model, it's often the case that we're not talking about the entire environment of the CIO being described as at one level or another. We're actually talking about key strategic parts of their environment being at different levels of maturity, and that they're seeking out different objectives, looking for different benefits based on their environment, based on their mission, and the capabilities that they have at play at that point in time, whether they're their internal capabilities, whether they're capabilities in partnership with key strategic suppliers, how they're bringing them all together. And this model helps to frame what the opportunity is as you set about moving from one level of maturity to another. So it helps people sort of frame amongst their stakeholders where they are today and why are they trying to go somewhere different? Why are they trying to make a change, especially in environments where everyone's talking about how complex things are and can't we make it simpler? Why am I going about making this change? And we have to frame this in terms of the benefits that can be yielded, and we have to understand what it's going to take in terms of a level of maturity of the organization to achieve it. And it's not always a benefit to move from, say, a stage 3 to a stage 4 for the entire environment, but it may be for a component of that environment. And that's the conversation that we've been having with a lot of clients.
Yeah, and I think Les, we're gonna see in a minute here in another slide how the characteristics are defined, and we're going to be able to look at, and the audience will be able to see how each one of these key characteristics we have across the bottom of this particular chart has its own set of sub-characteristics, each one of which is independent, and each one of which can have its own maturity curve to it. And again, it just, I think, and this is where you're going, it just helps us order the thinking as we go and talk about a services-based organization, a brokerage-based organization that's trying to manage multiple sources of supply and integrate those in a coherent delivery platform. And I think it's a good opportunity now to just kind of keep moving down that same conversation. The next slide is intended to show our audience that the categories we're talking about here all have definitions to them. All of these slides are going to be available to the viewers, and we're going to be using these definitions throughout the course of the project. For those who have received the survey and seen the survey, these definitions are used within the survey at the start of the question sets, but they just give some thinking and some framing to the stages in the maturity model. And then as we move into the characteristics themselves, we see that each characteristic has its own set of components, each one of which can help an organization key in on specific attributes that they might need to develop to become more effective as a broker or to become more effective in their specific environment. For instance, does an organization have the ability to have variable price and volume in the way they deliver a service to a customer or to an agency? We see more and more that technology services are consumption-based. The more you consume, the less it should cost. Is that something that customers can see? Is it something that an organization, a delivery organization, can manage? You're able to have a conversation around that, and if that's something that's important to your particular environment, there's a path to improve the way in which you get variable pricing around services. We could go through each one of these boxes and have a similar conversation about each one. But I think what's important and what we hope the audience will take away today is that as this project progresses and as we look at the questions that we're asking state CIOs, each one of the characteristics in the maturity model has its own, has substance behind it, and within each one of those subcategories, there's a separate conversation that can be held as an organization is moving towards a more modernized delivery model. Eric, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add here as we continue the dialogue, but if so, by all means, jump in.
Well, I think the other part of this whole journey is it's a learning circumstance where a lot of these things are going to mature in their own right. For instance, the ability to trade in and trade out certain providers, the way to integrate them and manage data, security is going to get more sophisticated over time. So I think it's important for everyone to understand this whole environment of the CIO operating model is going to get more and more sophisticated over time, and corporate partners will learn how to play a more effective role. There'll be more effective ways for actually reaching integration of multiple suppliers versus simply interoperability. So I think these dimensions are very well articulated, but keep in mind this whole world of the new operating model is going to change. Back to you, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And it's been great having the opportunity to go out and talk to a number of CIOs before we started this survey, and as we've developed a lot of the thinking of this project. And to a person, we can say that they've seen these definitions, they've seen these tables, and have agreed that this is absolutely heading in the same direction that they're seeing, and it captures the challenges that they're experiencing and presents a good way of thinking about how an organization can mature and how that supports the CIO's role inside an enterprise. Our next slide is again definitions for the categories themselves. These definitions are used to support the maturity model. They're also used to support the survey that again many of you have seen and are hopefully going to find the time to complete. As we now think about the way in which an organization evolves and the role of the CIO, we also want to think about what that CIO role progression looks like. What we're presenting here is that as the organization matures, so too must the CIO's role within that organization. In a stage one organization, we typically see the CIO operating largely as an administrator, tactical, project-oriented, technical. And for a long time, this was the perception of what the CIO was supposed to be. They're supposed to keep lights on, servers running, and data centers secure. Over time, the CIO role has become more sophisticated. It's become more of a strategist. And as you move up the maturity curve, the CIO becomes more of an architect, somebody able to put buildings together, put pieces together to help influence, to help collaborate with agencies, to help execute on a strategy. And then as you continue to move up the maturity curve, the CIO as a broker of services becomes empowering, engaging, and leading change across an environment. And certainly that's where we see the CIO role going, and where CIOs have validated themselves through NASCIO's research and in their own experiences, moving up that leadership curve and having a lot more influence inside the enterprise. And in doing so, being able to adopt the new methods of delivery that are important for their customers and important for citizens.
One of the pieces of feedback we've received as we've talked through the role of the CIO with the CIOs is that as you move up that maturity curve, you don't leave behind the role of being tactical. You don't leave behind the necessity to be in command of the technical competency of the environment.
Yeah, thanks, Les. And I think that's a great point, the way in which these roles and attributes are additive. You don't give up a piece in order to move to the next level. And so what does all this look like? How do you combine all of these pieces to see how a CIO would evolve, how the organization would evolve, and how the role evolves inside government? And that's what we're trying to capture in the next slide, where across the top we see the various stages of maturity, and then on the left-hand side we see the attributes of a maturing organization, including up at the top, and then up at the top, rather, we see what is the value that the CIO delivers, kind of defining what that core competency should be and what stakeholders and policymakers and governors and legislatures should expect from a state CIO. And we would argue that there's not a person in this audience, across the state CIO universe, that wants to do nothing but keep the lights on. We see CIOs wanting to be leaders. We see CIOs having influence across government and wanting to improve service to citizens, and helping NASCIO in the description of that role and helping policy makers understand where that role is going to a stage 5 where there's partnerships and leadership and collaboration going on. Ultimately is the hope of this project and what the outcomes we expect to have an influence on. We know that there's a lot going on with this slide. We look forward to questions later, and certainly we'll have the contact information later on where anybody on this call can reach out and speak with us. And then, Eric, this has been an interesting concept that we've been working on with NASCIO, and it's the application of this model, this framework that we've spent the last few slides reviewing, to one of NASCIO's iconic projects, which is the annual Top 10 survey. And what we've tried to do here is apply the thinking of the framework to that list. And look at the list as more than a list. Look at it as an operating model that captures the very issues that we're talking about here. How a CIO needs to use his or her leadership platform to affect and implement the things that are under their charge, like consolidation and optimization, like budget issues, like delivering shared services, while at the same time balancing enterprise demands like security and risk, data management and analytics, enterprise IT government, while at the same time working on external customer-facing services and integrating market solutions into what they have to deliver. Cloud services, broadband are great examples. And then ultimately that affects digital government, and it affects the external side of government where citizens are impacted, where citizens receive service. Eric, love to hear your take on this. I know that this is also a work in progress, but we think that there's some application here, and look forward to kind of evolving the thinking behind this framework.
I agree. Let's move to the next slide, Patrick, because that will give some real context for the way we're thinking about the top 10. The top 10 priorities, of course, there's two lists. The primary one is the strategies list that gets most of the press, and that's what we're presenting here. But that list modulates over time and plays the role of kind of an indicator of where states are and what are they responding to. Of course, we're accumulating all of these ballots from across the country to assemble the top 10. And within every state, look at the four forces, they're going to be slightly different. Part of the reason for that is we've got different reporting models in different states. Sometimes the state CIO is on the cabinet for the governor. Sometimes the state CIO is reporting to a board. Sometimes they're reporting to a cabinet member. So they're a couple of spaces away from the governor. So they're in possibly under the Secretary of Administration. So the political forces, in particular, executive support may be slightly different. Election cycle timing, policy changes, come over to the inertial forces, different organizational designs. But all of those things can be unique within a state. We're trying to assemble a common set of strategies that tell NASCIO as a national association, what are we going to work on this year? And as we see these different forces impacting from each state, the top 10 for each state, and then we assemble that up to a top 10 for all of the states and territories. That is pushing us toward this idea of an operating model that in fact can adapt, can react, respond to those political forces no matter what they are, respond to those market forces that continually change. And the CIO is in this role of trying to meet citizen demands, meet the platform requirements that have been presented by the governor, their agenda, and at the same time managing the amazing plethora of technologies that are coming at the CIO from the market, and looking for what can we exploit now, what's ready for prime time, what's not quite ready. And so that whole dynamic is facilitated in terms of management through this new CIO operating model, partnering with corporate partners at times, partnering with other jurisdictions, or actually delivering capabilities from internal resources. Patrick, back to you.
Thanks, Eric, and agree with where you're going, and hope that this ends up providing some value and a new way of looking at these top 10s. There's certainly more than a list, and this audience is gonna have a paper coming out soon to kind of explore that topic a little bit more. So we look forward to seeing that published. And with that, Eric, we're at the end of the webinar and end of the presentation. We hope that this has helped provide some insights into the thinking that is both in this project as well as in the survey that the participants on this webinar will receive. We anticipate a lot of insights from that survey that will then help shape the papers to come, the playbook at the end of the year, and I'm certain some additional thinking that will result in more opportunities going into next year.
We're presenting contact information here and invite you to contact any of us. If you've got questions, if you've got insights that you'd like to share, please contact us. We're very open to that. And also, stay tuned to NASCIO with the various communities that we have relative to cybersecurity, enterprise architecture, data management, privacy. We've got multiple webinars coming forth in future. Stay tuned for those. And here's how to stay in touch with us. Thank you both, Les and Patrick, for presenting. Thank you, Dr. Craig Orgeron and Eric Boyette, for your comments. And we will close this call. Thank you.